Okay, hello everyone. We're going to make a start. To start us off then with a health and safety announcement, there is no fire alarm drill anticipated today. If the alarm sounds, please leave the building through the nearest fire exit by following the signs above the doors. Make your way to the rear of the car park and wait there until you are told it is safe to return. And please also make sure all phones are either muted or switched off. To start the meeting proper then, good morning everyone and welcome to this Strategic Planning Committee meeting on Monday the 19th of May 2025. I'm your chair, Councillor Todd Olive. Supporting officers present today are Ed Freeman, Assistant Director, Planning, Strategy and Development Management, Damien Hunter, Planning Solicitor, Melissa Wall, who is Section 106 Officer, and Wendy Harris, Democratic Services Officer. Can I remind everyone present that this meeting is recorded for publication on the Council's website, so please can members and officers making a contribution to the meeting use a microphone or your comments will not be recorded. Before I start the meeting then, just to advise everyone, there has been one change to committee membership following annual council last week. Big thanks to Councillor Bethany Collins, who has joined us today on her day off for fun, as she's left us to join the planning committee out of the coals and into the fire, I think there, Councillor Collins possibly, and a big welcome to Councillor Del Haggerty, who's joined the committee but isn't with us today. We'll now start the meeting then by doing a roll call of committee members and declaration of interests, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll start with yourself, Councillor Olive.
Present and nothing to declare, save some lobbying emails reference item 7.
Thank you. Councillor Brian Bailey.
Present, Wendy, nothing to declare.
Councillor Jess Bailey.
Present, and I would like to declare, please, an ORI in item number 7. I will be speaking as a member of the public and then leaving the room, not participating in any voting or discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Blakey.
Present and no declarations.
Thank you. Councillor Colin Brown.
Present and no declarations other than item 7. I think we've all had an email or letter on that one.
Thank you. Councillor Hayward.
Thank you. Present. Similarly, an ORI in respect of my role as Devon County Councillor. I'll also be recusing myself during that item. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ingham.
Present, no declarations.
Thank you. Councillor Young.
Present. I've got declaration of interest for agenda item 7, seal bids. There are a number of environmental proposals being proposed that have had party and development. Agenda item 8, South East Devon Habitat Mitigation. I sit on the joint committee for the Habitat Mitigation and discuss the proposal that is recommended to this committee. And agenda item 10, Planning and Infrastructure Bill. There are a number of changes to environmental practices addressed in the report. However, I understand the importance of all the other key drivers that are not included in my portfolio, and therefore I come to this meeting with an open mind and listen to all views for and against. Thank you.
Councillor, could I just check actually, is that an NRI then for the first
NRI,
two?
yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ledger. No. Councillor Levy.
Present, no declaration, but may I say that it's so nice to see smiling faces at the top table.
Councillor Parr.
Present, no declarations.
Thank you. And can I just ask the non-committee members here present today, do they have any declarations? Councillor Rylance.
Thank you, Wendy. Yes, I do have a declaration as a patient of pinhole Broadcliffe surgery, so agenda item 7, which I also intend to speak on. That's an effects NRI, isn't it? I think.
It's an effects NRI so long as you don't think that you're prejudiced in any way further than anybody else. So is that what you're saying? Yeah, okay, that's fine then, yeah.
Thank you. Any other non-committee members? Councillor Faithful.
I'm not sure if I really need to declare it, but I will anyway. Is possibly, it has been in the past, affects NRI. I have quite some time ago had private conversations in relation to Tipton Primary School being in Tipton, but I've not had any conversations for about a year.
Thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Before we move on to agenda item 1 then, members will note there is a gap on the smiling front table, so we need to elect a vice chair for today's meeting, please. And I'd like to propose Councillor Levine. All those in favour, please. Are you still smiling, Councillor Levine?
That's what it was, wasn't it? Yeah, he's putting his up before it came.
He knew it was coming. Okay, agenda item 1 then, the minutes of the previous meeting held what feels like an eon ago on the 4th of February 2025. Does anybody have any comments or corrections on those minutes, please? No? Okay, in which case then as chair, I'd like to move those minutes as a true and accurate record. Members, please raise your hand if you're in support. Thank you, that's clearly carried. Agenda item 2 then, apologies. I have apologies from councillors Davey, Howe, Fernley and Haggerty. Have we had any further apologies in, Wendy?
Just non-committee member, Councillor Charlotte Fitzgerald.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 3 then, declarations of interest we have already done, which brings us then to agenda item 4, public speaking. We do have a number of members of the public registered to speak this morning, so just a reminder please to everyone, you will have 3 minutes as soon as you press the right hand button on the microphone at the lectern, and your remaining time will be shown on the screen. First up then we have Mr. Robert Percy.
Good morning, and thank you for allowing me to speak this morning on affordable rural housing, and more specifically on rural exception sites and East Devon's policy of requiring housing needs surveys to justify affordable rural housing, which I consider to be contravening paragraph 82 of the NPPF. And I'll just read that paragraph so that people may need to be refreshed. Paragraph 82 says, local planning authorities should support opportunities to bring forward rural exception sites that will provide affordable rural housing to meet identified rural needs. Now, East Devon District Council, unlike other local authorities, requires a housing needs survey. Other local authorities use the numbers on the housing waiting list. And for reference, East Devon has over 5,100 families, desperate families, on their housing waiting list. But East Devon doesn't regard them as being in need, which I find as being shameful. Mid-Devon, I live very close to Mid-Devon District Council, and they don't require housing needs surveys. A recent Freedom of Information Act request identified that there are only 3 parishes in the whole of East Devon, that's out of about 65 or 68 parishes, that have conducted a housing needs survey in the last 2 years. So if there are no housing needs surveys carried out, there will be no affordable rural housing. I must assume that this is a deliberate policy on behalf of East Devon District Council to prevent affordable rural housing. So why doesn't East Devon follow the practice of, say, Mid Devon District Council? Why does it not want affordable rural housing? Well, the answer must surely lie with you, the councillors. But as an outsider, it appears that East Devon is using these housing needs surveys as a blocking mechanism in order to endear and pander themselves to the NIMBY voters who are very important at election time. I would hope that the votes of the NIMBYs are not going to dominate the need for affordable rural housing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Percy. Could you just switch the microphone off, please? Thank you. By way of response, I'm not going to come to officers on this. You will be aware you've had a number of emails which I've copied to other members of this authority that have addressed why we don't currently use housing needs surveys as a measure for that. It is because they're not an appropriate measure, because there are flaws with that data, which means, for example, folks with no actual identified need come into that figure of 5,100 or so families. It's not an appropriate figure to use. It's very difficult for us to localise the way the data set is set up. With all that said, I believe we will be looking, when it comes to revising our affordable housing supplementary planning document following adoption of the new local plan, we will be looking at revising that SPD, and one of the things that we will look at is how we can whether we can use an adapted version of the housing waitlist that in some way takes into account of that method of data collection, but it will require improvement for it to be used as a valid data input to the planning process. The alternative is that we're effectively opening up a free-for-all all the way across East Devon, and developers could pay a couple of £1,000s to have a housing needs survey done and effectively justify building anywhere in the countryside, anywhere in East Devon. That's fundamentally counter to what the NPPF says, to what the local plan says, and we have to have regard to that as well. With that said then, we'll move on to next public speaker, Councillor Henry Chent. Good morning, Henry.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for having me to speak. And I'm speaking to item 7, the SIL expenditure policy. And as the division member for Broadcliffe Division, with 5 of the items on the agenda of great importance to my division, and they're all on the list that are proposed to be accepted, I very much hope that you are going to accept the recommendations of this report, notwithstanding how sad I am for the items which have been missed off, such as Tipton St John, which I feel for dearly. But these items are really important for Broadcliffe Division, and I'm very much hoping you will accept the report, and I'm not going to reiterate it, but I would just say that as division member, I'm very conscious, as far as the school is concerned, of how incredibly pressing the need is to get a new school at Tide Barn, and more information is coming through almost by the week from county officers. And recently in April, we learnt how many pupils who live in Tide Barn have failed to get a place at Monkston School, their nearest primary school. And of those, I think it was 18 who couldn't get a place at Monkston, 9 of them couldn't get a place in their top 3. So children are having to go to their 4th or 5th choice well into Exeter or to Cliff St Mary, and the situation is really desperate. And I did a bit of canvassing in Tide Barn, and nearly every door I opened, there seemed to be toddlers in the hallway behind the parent, and parents anxious about whether this school is going to be built at Tide Barn. So I can't emphasise how important that is. And the surgery at Pinho is likewise something where time is of the essence. It really is important to get that surgery built, to get that extension built as soon as possible. And as some of you may know, that the practice are going to close their list in October if they haven't got definite route forward by then. So it's really important. And we've been delayed, sadly, by the pre-election period. This meeting's been delayed, and those critical decisions have been put off for too long. So please do accept the recommendations of this report. Thank you very much indeed. Oh, I just did want to say the Cranbrook thing about the road, the London road, it is actually really important. It may not seem all that urgent, but it's really vital that the London road at Cranbrook, which currently is almost like a bypass of the town, will no longer be a bypass to the town. It will be a thread that draws together the new southern extensions of Cranbrook. A lot of thought's been going into that for a long time, and it's really important to keep the ball rolling on London Road, so please don't leave that one off the list either. I support all the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gent. On the same item, we have Ms Janice Ahern.
Thank you very much, especially as I was rather a latecomer, for allowing me to speak. On the subject of the Tipton St John Primary School feasibility bid. Basically, and very simply, what I'm going to ask is that this item is deferred, awaiting further discussion and clarity on the Department of Education's actual needs and requirements. Tipton School is without doubt in need of a new building, but as far as the village goes, and I am a resident and have been for 35 years, I've also had children at the school for the last 26, 27 years. It's the heart of our village, and if the school's taken out of the village, then the village itself will die. So I think it's very important that we get everything correct at each stage, which is why I'm asking for a deferment of this item until a later date so that we can have clarity on exactly what the Department of Education requires. I hope that's made it clear. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you. And we can consider that point if members should wish to when we get to item 7. Next up then, on agenda item 9, Mr John Hamill.
Good morning, Mr Olive. Good morning, Mr Freeman. Good morning, all. My name is still John Hamill. I still live in Ting Tong. When I sat down to prepare for today, the 1933 film Sons of the Desert came to mind, picking up on Councillor Vine's thing there. It starred Laurel and Hardy, and Ollie says to Stan, well, here's another fine mess you've gotten me into. I couldn't work out who was Ollie and who was Stan. I spoke to you on the 11th of December last year, and again on the 4th of February this year. On both occasions, I urge you to stop and think. Take the necessary time and get the critical process of this plan right. We all know the Regulation 19 consultation went ahead. It was met with a huge response. 3,461 comments as of Friday last, of which 1,791 were on Chapter 5. You are all aware of the strength of feeling against EXMO 20. It's reasonable to assume many of those comments were against EXMO 20. Let's not forget, at your last meeting, Brian Bailey said he wished he hadn't voted for it, and he said many of you have the same opinion. We were allowed 42 days to make our submission. 48 days since the deadline, your own staff are still entering comments. Mr Freeman tells us it's a time-consuming process. I say to him, try using commonplace. Mr Freeman further suggests members of the public deliberately tried to make things difficult. I say to him again, we didn't need to. You did it to yourselves. You should either substantiate that or withdraw it, Mr Freeman. The inadequacy of the plan and the consultation is made clear by the report today. We await technical outputs and evidence. The timetable is not now a realistic proposition. We must fully consider representations from the past. We must make changes. At the meeting of the 4th of February, Jess Bailey was clearly concerned that this plan and consultation were not robust enough. On that day, she was ignored. I'm sure she's pleased now, at least Mr Freeman agrees with her. Alongside 3,461 comments on commonplace, this plan has managed to upset the statutory bodies, the Environment Agency, Natural England, other authorities. You've even upset the NHS. There are concerns about specific sites and to the plan as a whole. So I conclude as I started last year. Please delay this plan. Follow the right and lawful processes. Get the site selection right. Am I right to continue, Mr. Todd, or you? Mr. Olive, or you, because you're talking, yeah? Have I got your attention?
You do have my attention,
Thank you very
yes.
much indeed. Follow the right and lawful processes. Get the site selection right. Get the consultation right. Take your time. Plan carefully. And you know, if EXMO 20 were dropped, perhaps you would not be in this condition. Finally, because I'm out of time, Oliver Hardy was famous for another quote. You know, there's a right way and a wrong way to do everything. I urge you to do it the right way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hamill, for those comments. I'm going to ask Mr. Freeman to respond, as we have 3 speakers on more or less the same topic. So I'll ask Mr. Freeman to respond once all 3 have spoken, just to save a bit of time there. Next, we have, I believe, a written statement from Mr. Nigel Humphrey, which Wendy is going to read out for us, please.
Thank you, Chair. Dear councillors, further to my email that I sent to you on the 1st of May 2025, I would like to take this opportunity to highlight the following very brief summary of my Reg 18 investigation. And as a consequence of these findings and those identified in my email of the 1st of May, I also request that you remove EXMO 20 from the draft local plan before it is put forward to the Planning Inspectorate. The following is a brief summary of my findings. Number 1. EXMO 20 was identified within the HELA report as available but not suitable or achievable. This, along with your own site selection methodology document dated May 2022, which was not changed until December 2024, means that EXMO 20 failed stage 2 site sifting. Therefore, it should not have been put forward for consultation at Reg 18. At the developer's presentation on the 9th of August 2022, the land at St John's was presented by 3 developers. During this presentation, Councillor Nick Hookway asked if the northern part of the site was being developed, to which the developers responded no. The only part of the site being proposed for development was a southern part for 75 plus 75 homes. Then Councillor Jessica Bailey asked, what site are we discussing here? To which one of the developers answered, I think it is EXMO 20. They should have been correctly informed that it was really site EXMO 46. The draft local plan for Reg 18 should have referenced EXMO 46, not EXMO 20B. The HELA report, provided as evidence in Reg 18 and Reg 19, does not reference EXMO 20A or EXMO 20B, but does reference EXMO 20 and EXMO 46. The EXMO site's additional information document, provided as evidence in Reg 18, see pages 31 to 34, does not reference EXMO 20A or EXMO 20B, but does reference EXMO 20 and EXMO 46. It also states that EXMO 20 is not being promoted for development. The Sustainability Appraisal Report, November 22, provided as evidence in Reg 18, see pages 251 to 268, does not reference EXMO 20A or EXMO 20B, but does reference EXMO 20 and EXMO 46. It also states that EXMO 20 is not being promoted for development. The 2 new sites, EXMO 20A and EXMO 20B, suddenly appeared in the EXMO sites map as part of the report pack for the SPC meeting on the 1st of November 2022, a mere 6 days before the start of Reg 18. It is interesting that these new sites are never discussed at the meeting. Why? If you suddenly split a site into 2 parts, then as a minimum, the descriptions for those parts are different, but it will also change the composition of the sites. Yet no discussions took place within this meeting. Based on all the above, it is evident that only EXMO 46 should have been put forward for Regulation 18 consultation, and that sites XMO 20A and XMO 20B should never been created, never mind put forward into Reg 18. In light of the evidence provided, I urge you to remove XMO 20 from the draft local plan before it is put forward to the Planning Inspectorate. End of statement.
Thank you, Wendy. Mr. Shillito.
Well, that consultation didn't go as you planned. It exposed the half-baked plan that many had voiced concerns over, including councillors here on the 4th of February, but concerns were pacified by Mr. Freeman and Councillor Olive. Before discussing timescales, understand tweaking of this plan is not going to deal with the fundamental problems dating back years. Reg 19 is not a draft for you. It's the version you should believe can be adopted, but is so obviously deficient. For example, XMO 20 failed the initial HELAR test, yet the Reg 19 evidence falsely states it passed, justifying its inclusion. This site was not available, suitable, or achievable. The policy team do not seem to care. Any concerns you councillors have will likely be pacified. False evidence, either intentionally or via incompetence, neither will be acceptable to the inspector. Further evidence has been fiddled with. The site selection methodology used has disappeared and replaced by a different methodology. Some chosen sites could not be included due to the methodology, but rather than reselect sites, the policy team amended the evidence. They clearly don't care. Any concerns you councillors have will probably be pacified, but the inspector will be very concerned. I have a question to be answered today. The Reg 19 HRA stated an inherent conflict within the plan and could not support it. The planning inspector's guidance note states the LPA should rigorously assess the plan before it is published under Reg 19 to ensure that, in their view, it is sound and meets all the necessary legal requirements. So, did this LPA believe, in its view, that with an HRA stating an inherent... The sound's still working, sorry. That the Reg 19 plan was sound and met all the necessary legal requirements? Please answer yes or no so it's clear to the inspector. There is a fundamental Habs Reg principle of avoidance over mitigation that you are yet to assess the site selections against, but you're already spending thousands on ecologists to justify a site that contradicts this principle. Oh, and failed HELAR. There's no point spending SIL money for the pebble beds or endorsing the wildlife strategy today if you are, as a competent authority, disregard your legal duties. Councillors, you've had to sit here and be told reports are forthcoming and iterative in development, yet that your site selections were set in stone last year cannot be revisited, despite evidence filtering through, potentially changing your opinions. Like in January, that the XMO 20 site will have no meaningful access to Deanham Way or Exmouth itself and rely on a dangerous rural road that already has excessive nitrogen levels at the internationally protected sites. Meanwhile, a wonderful new road is under construction, linking to the preferred but currently discarded Hullam Road sites. If you want to maintain control of this local plan, first accept, as agreed and minuted, the Reg 18 consultation was only for the preferred and second choice sites. Therefore, that must be your site selection pot. Please give these councillors the information needed before their decisions are considered final. Your behaviour will be judged by the inspector, the ombudsman, the judicial review judge. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Shillito. I will come then to Mr. Freeman. Just come back on points raised by those three speakers, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. Well, I'm not going to respond to points about the merits or otherwise of XMO 20 because that's not for today. That we will obviously be bringing a report, a feedback report.
Can we have quiet from the public gallery, please?
We will obviously be bringing a feedback report on the Regulation 19 consultation to members in due course, setting out the responses that we've received and officers' response to those and recommendations about how we proceed with the plan. So I think those are issues to be considered at that point in time rather than today. Today's report is simply about the timescales. Take the points that have been raised about taking time and getting it right. Obviously, we've been working on this plan since 2021, so I don't feel it's been rushed. It's been an ongoing process, and obviously we continue to work in refining the plan and the evidence that supports it, and we'll continue to do so up until the point of submission. I don't believe there's any false evidence. It's simply that evidence is an ongoing process of updating and refreshing as we go. I think the only other thing two other things to say. One is I think Mr. Hamill said that I had said that people were deliberately not using commonplace to make it difficult for us. I've never said that. The other thing...
I have asked once. If I have to ask again, I will ask you to leave. Thank you.
The report simply makes a factual statement that some people chose not to use commonplace. That's not saying that people deliberately did that to make it life difficult for us. I have read the pack, thank you. The other point is Mr. Shillito's question. Yes, I did believe and do believe that the Reg 19 plan was sound. But we obviously have to take on board the comments that we've received and review that position, and that's the current position. And as I say, we'll be bringing a full feedback report and making recommendations to members about how we proceed in due course. Thank you.
Sorry, this is now the third time that I've had to say, can we have quiet from the public gallery, please? Public speaking has now concluded. We're going to move on to the remainder of the meeting. If you've got further questions, you are, as always, welcome to submit them by email. Thank you. Agenda item 5, matters of urgency. I'm sorry, Mr. Hamill, Mr. Shillito. I take real issue with the way that some members of the public choose to come and talk to us about some of these sites. We live here too. We give a damn about what happens in our district. No, because I didn't know where Ting Tong was, but I knew where Exmo 20 was. Thank you very much, Mr. Hamill.
Just to clarify, Mr. Freeman, you answered the question that I emailed and read out today. And your answer was yes. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. And did any of the...
Mr. Shillito, public speaking has now concluded. Thank you. We are going to move to the rest of the meeting. Agenda item 5, there are no matters of urgency to be considered in the rest of the agenda today. Mr. Shillito, it's not for committee to ask you questions during the committee meeting. You're a member of the public.
Can I just say that every other committee that has spoken at have permitted the councillors to ask the speaker questions. I don't understand why it's not permitted in the strategic planning committee.
There is no provision in the Constitution for members of the public to ask, or I should say no provision in the Constitution of which I am aware for members of committee to ask members of the public questions. If that's incorrect, I'll be corrected by our planning solicitor, who's here to advise us on legal matters. We are now going to move on to agenda item 5. Thank you very much. Okay, unless you cease now, I'm going to adjourn the meeting and we'll stop until you've left.
Thank you. When are you not coming up for re-election?
Agenda item 5, matters of urgency, there are none. Agenda item 6, confidential or exempt items, there are none. Which brings us to agenda item 7, community infrastructure levy bid recommendations on pages 12 to 17 of your agenda pack.
Thank you, Chair. So this report talks you through the bids we received for community infrastructure levy funding and the process that we've gone through in terms of scoring those bids and consideration by the SIL member working party. So you'll see from the report that the fund currently holds just over £12 million. We've received 12 bids in total, with a total value of over £17 million. So unfortunately, we're not going to be able to support all of those bids, and there's some difficult decisions to be made today in terms of which of these bids can be supported and which cannot. You'll be aware that there are meetings of SIL members working party earlier this year during January and February to consider these bids, which were open to all members, and I know a number of members around the table attended some or all of those sessions. So to just set out some context in terms of the bid scoring, you will see in section 3 of the report that a total of 4 scoring criteria were used. The first of which was about the infrastructure delivery plan and the priority that's given to each of the projects within that plan. Members will recall infrastructure delivery plan coming through the committee a number of years ago now, and that sets out priorities 1, 2 and 3 for infrastructure projects needed to deliver the plan. So a score was attributed accordingly, with the highest score going to priority 1 projects, which are those that are essential to deliver the plan. The second criteria used was around need and looking at the current infrastructure issues, consequences of not carrying out the project, whether it supports the delivery of housing or economic development, and also this issue about whether it delivers actual infrastructure, which we'll come on to. Value for money was another criteria that was used. So this was looking at what additional funding, match funding, was being put forward to ensure that we got best value for money out of the SIL funds that were being used. And deliverability was the final issue, whether the project has planning permission, the risks associated with it, how those are being managed, timescales for delivery, those sorts of issues. And so each of the bids was scored on that basis, which then gives a guide to the suitability for funding. We're not suggesting that we simply go on scoring alone. Obviously, there are other factors to be considered. Section 4 of the report talks about a number of principles that we used in terms of looking at allocating the funding. One of those was about feasibility studies. You'll see when I come to the bids that a couple of the bids were specifically for feasibility work alone and not necessarily leading to the direct delivery of infrastructure. So a decision was made early on that it was felt that it wasn't appropriate necessarily to prioritise those bids, given that SIL funding should be used for the delivery of infrastructure and making a physical delivery of infrastructure that's going to improve the quality of life of residents of the district and help to deliver the plan. Cost overruns was another issue that it was quickly decided that the council should not expose itself to future risk by underwriting any project cost overruns. So we'd literally taken the bids at face value in terms of the amounts that are being asked for, and the intention would be to give funding to that amount, and therefore to be no allowance for cost overruns. And also looking at this issue about combining Section 106 and SIL funding. So we have accepted circumstances where Section 106 funds are being used as match funding. Members will be aware changing the regulations in 2019 removed the cap on pooling contributions from Section 106 and SIL. So that's now something that we can use. There was also an early decision from the working group around trying to retain some money within the SIL pot so that we can be flexible in terms of future projects that might come forward and opportunities for match funding from government. So there was a view taken that a sum of at least £1 million should be retained for delivery of future projects. So turning to the bids that were received in section 5, you'll see that those are all listed out in terms of the scores and the projects themselves and the costs that were being sought. If I just pick up on the main projects within that, Cliffs Meadow Country Park, Station Road, Broadcliff Sangs. I think members will be aware of this project, which was reported to Cabinet in May last year. In terms of the essential need for this project in terms of delivering our requirements in terms of habitat regulations for Cranbrook development that's coming forward. So this is a priority 1 project, a critical project in our infrastructure delivery plan, which comprises a request for £3.383 million of SIL funding, matched with £530,000 of Section 106 receipts and £200,000 from the Council's capital programme. So as I say, this was considered by Cabinet on the 1st of May, and there was a a resolution that the SANGs should be managed using an endowment model at that time, but it was flagged that the endowment would need to be funded from SIL and that this would equate to around £2 million of SIL funding. So I think this was the main topic of conversation for the working group, was in terms of the funding of the long-term maintenance of the SANGs there. An alternative proposal came forward at a future meeting whereby an annual contribution could be taken from SIL, which would be in the region of £15,000 to £30,000 per annum in terms of maintenance costs, but also there's a need for allowing for future capital replacement programmes. So there's an option there in terms of setting aside potentially £40,000 per annum as a total maintenance cost that also includes some allowance for replacement programme, or an alternative option around an annual contribution of £25,000 per annum plus varying capital replacement costs as required. So there are options within there in terms of how that's maintained in the future. But I think the preference of the working group was that it be an annual contribution from SIL rather than an endowment model to avoid that upfront £2 million cost. Bearing in mind that an endowment could also be set up at some point in the future if that was considered to be a better option at that time. So moving on then, another project mentioned at 5.2 is enhancing sport provision in Honiton. So this is to improve facilities for football and rugby, plus multi-sport provision in the community coordinated by the Town Council. So this is delivering new youth football facilities at Tower Hill, adjoining Honiton Golf Club, subject to planning permission, and a new all-weather 11x11 3G football pitch at the Community College and Primary School in conjunction with the Tedrag Trust, as well as drainage and floodlights at the rugby club at All Hallows. So this is a project that's responding to needs identified in the playing pitch strategy of 2015 and the Honiton playing sports pitch strategy, I think it's actually called, in 2016. So it includes a good level of match funding with Section 106 monies being secured from the Hayne Lane development, together with some monies coming forward from the Football Foundation and the Tedrag Trust and Honiton Town Council. So the project scored highly on the basis that although it's only priority 2 in terms of the infrastructure delivery plan, as I say, it's supported by the playing pitch strategy, is deliverable in the short term and provides very good levels of match funding. So moving on to Cranbrook Multi-Use Park. This was a Devon County Council project that involves the construction of 1.5 kilometre off-road route for walking, wheeling and cycling, linking between the Cliff Meadow Country Park and Moss Hayne Lane. It's the last section of a multi-user route which has largely been delivered by the developers, but there's this missing section that's needed to create that link between Cranbrook and Exeter. And provides an alternative means of travel between the two and linking up the various employment sites. It has planning permission already, but the total project cost is just under £4.5 million, with £1.8 million required from SIL. I think the working group felt that these costs were very high. We had a presentation from officers at Devon County Council regarding that. And the understanding was that there's very challenging wet ground conditions and ecological issues on the site, which are bumping up the project costs. But it scores highly as a priority 1 project in terms of the IDP, meets the green agenda and active travel agenda. It has planning permission, and the ECC have £2.47 million of funding to match the contribution from SIL. Moving on to the school at Tive Barn, Moss Hayne, which has been mentioned already. This is another proposal from Devon County Council for a 210-place school to support the 900 dwelling development there. Just under 50% of those homes have been built and has generated SIL proceeds of 2.375 million already. Completion of the development will take SIL revenue over the 4.5 million requested in this bid. There is some history to this that members might be aware, which led to, in the planning permission, the land being secured, but no contribution due to the switching from Section 106 to SIL at that point in time. But there is a side agreement with Devon County Council that secures the land, but requires that to be transferred to them by May 2027. So there are time constraints in terms of our ability to deliver this project. But again, it's a priority 1 project in the infrastructure delivery plan. There is a pressing need for the school. We've already heard about the burden it's placing on other schools in the area and the implications of that for residents and their children in terms of not being able to go to their first priority school and having to travel long distances to second, third, or even fourth priorities. It could be brought forward relatively quickly. As I say, the land is secured and there's limited match funding is a problem, but projected development costs are also estimates at this time as well, so there are some risks associated with that. London Road Cranbrook improvements. Again, this is a DCC project to deliver footway, cycle enhancements and traffic calming on the London Road. This is basically to deliver fill in the gap between the sections that have been delivered by the relevant developers already or are coming forward as part of the expansion areas, the priority being to link the Cranberry Farm pub to Ingram's and leading to the Cobdens and Grange expansion areas. The intention here being fundamentally to prevent the Cobdens expansion area becoming isolated in terms of footpath and cycle provision. Again, this is a priority 1 project and needed to ensure safe and green travel options and is deliverable in the next 2 years. It didn't score so well on value for money though, as there's limited match funding in this case. Just moving on then to the pinhole surgery extension. This is an NHS project that's to expand the existing surgery at Pinhoe, which while outside of the district and within Exeter, is largely catering for the needs of patients within East Devon. It includes a 2-storey, 216 square metre extension to create 6 new clinical rooms and additional admin space. It's only a priority 2 project in the infrastructure delivery plan, but it is needed to meet the demands of new development in the West End and West Clyst that has planning permission. The expansion to the surgery has planning permission as of January this year and is deliverable in the next 2 years. I think there's a genuine need for the delivery of this. As we've heard, the surgery is in a position where they are in danger of having to close their list later this year, which would then remove provision, essentially, for GP provision for additional dwellings in that area, which already have planning permission and are coming forward. So a real fundamental problem there. Through negotiation, the bid has been reduced down to £800,000. This is on the basis of match funding coming forward through the NHS Utilisation and Modernisation Fund, which is a fund that's been made available while this process has been going on. So there is a dual bid going in for that fund as we speak. I say the extension will enhance the value of the surgery, which is fundamentally a private business. So this is a slightly unusual situation in terms of funding. And you'll see in the report that there are mechanisms proposed to be put in place to ensure that this money is used for public benefit and remains to be used for public benefit, and that it's not the owners of that business and the surgery that benefit from this in any way. And that can all be secured through the funding agreement as required. The other bids mentioned in the report are bids that are not successful, so I won't major on those. They're listed in section 6.2. You see the rejected bids there. As I mentioned, the feasibility studies relate to Tipton Primary School and the Devon Metro Rail scheme for the passing loop. There are also bids that were not supported in terms of Tipton St John Playing Field Association for Replacement Pavilion, Stockland Tennis Club, surface replacement and new path, and from the Devon Cricket Foundation. These are, the last 3 are projects that are not in the Council's infrastructure delivery plan, and as a result, we're not considering those to be sufficiently high priorities as worthy as I'm sure they are in terms of delivering facilities for the community. So the supported bids are listed at paragraph 6.3 in the report. You'll see it's in a table form, so you can see the bidder and the project, the amount that's being sought, and the conditions of the funding, many of which I've mentioned already in terms of the ongoing maintenance costs, for example, of the Cliss Meadow Country Park, and the other key one in terms of terms and conditions is regard to the extension to Pinhoe Surgery, and as I say, ensuring that that is money that's used for public benefit and is not otherwise beneficial to the business there. So just turning back to the recommendations, you'll see there are 4 recommendations in this case. The first being that members agree the recommendations of the SIL member working party in respect of each SIL bid received and rejected. listed in the tables at paragraph 6.2 in terms of those rejected, and those approved are in paragraph 6.3. Members are then asked to agree that all bidders who submitted rejected bids be advised of the outcome of their bid, and reference given to the reasons stated in the report. Then that members give delegated authority to myself in consultation with the Director of Governance to agree funding agreements with the successful bidders based on the conditions that are set out in the report. And finally, that members advise Cabinet that they do not agree to funding an endowment to cover the maintenance costs of the Sang at Station Road Broadclist as per Cabinet's resolution of the 1st May 2024, and recommend that Cabinet agree that these costs be funded through an annual contribution of £40,000 from SIL for the first 3 years, after which these should be reviewed. As I said, the endowment model could be set up at any time. The working group felt that that was a matter dealt with best through an annual contribution from SIL to start with, rather than make that commitment to £2 million for the endowment at this stage. So I make those recommendations to the committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Freeman. Before we come then to all of the many people who I'm sure want to speak on this one, Mr. Hunter, could I just seek some advice very quickly? Conscious that we have some members who have declared ORIs, so we'll have to leave, as well as some non-committee members who would like to speak. Would it be your advice that the folks who've declared an ORI have to speak first now and then leave before non-committee members, or does it not matter as long as they leave before we come into committee?
It doesn't really matter, so long as everybody, so long as anybody who wants to speak speaks and then leaves before we get into the discussion and vote by the committee. Okay. So I'd hear from everybody first, let everybody listen to what everybody's got to say, and then they'd leave.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hunter. In which case then I'll do non-committee members first, and then I'll come to those who've declared an ORI on committee. And I'm going to go round in the order in which you are seated. So Councillor Rylance first, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'd like to speak to 3/4 items in the list, and also recommendation 4 in the recommendations. So I'll take them one by one, if that's okay. I'll do recommendation 4 and item 5.1 about Clist Meadows first, but also linked to that, the so-called Cranbrook multi-use path, which will bisect Clist Meadows. So obviously we have to deliver this as part of our commitments to nature and to the Pebblebed Heaths. What I'm concerned about with recommendation 4 is that what we're delivering is quite a complex environment. It's going to be quite engineered at the start. And I very sincerely hope that Broadcliffe Parish Council and East Devon District Council are talking in very active talks about how its long-term future can be ensured in terms of maintenance going forwards, because we are delivering, quite rightly, a very beautifully complex environment that is going to need ongoing maintenance for a long time, and will also be bisected by the path, which is called the Cranbrook Multi-Use Path, which will be linking employment sites next to Sky Park, next to the airport, with the west end of Cranbrook and also Broadclist. So a crucial environment with a very valuable bit of infrastructure crossing it. It's very crucial that we get this right, because that will improve the lives of many people and also enable active travel to work, which at the moment is not, it's a very long way round if you want to get to the little warehouse, put it that way at the moment. And I can tell you that because my Ukrainian guests had to do it for quite some time, and walking down Station Road is no joke. Right, so that's 5.1 and recommendation 4. So I do hope we are really considering the long-term future of the SANGs and how it will be funded going forwards. And I, taking on board what you said about the potential of an endowment fund coming forward at a later date, it is really crucial that we get that right, because it is a very wet, damp environment. It's a water meadow, basically. Bless you. Right, okay, moving on to the next thing, which is 5.4. I think, is that the surgery? It's the school. Okay, yeah, the school. Right, so I'll echo what Councillor Gent said earlier about the demographics of Tithbarn. To me, it is nonsensical that we don't yet have a primary school in Tithbarn. It is a development almost entirely composed of young families, often with very young babies who, even if they're toddling now, will be at school in 2 years' time and probably looking at applying for a school place next year. It is absolutely essential that we deliver this school in the middle of Tithbarn to allow active travel to school. Last year, after school allocation places, I was contacted by a number of families very distressed because they had been allocated schools they would never have thought of applying for, school they hadn't even heard of, a faith-based school that did not correspond to their family values at all. And so it's very crucial that we are not sending children from Tithbarn to schools where there are places when they could have a school on their doorstep, as it has been promised for some time. So very much looking forward to that school being delivered, and not having to send children a very long way up a very main road at rush hour, aged 4. I tried walking it with my teenage dogs and it was no fun whatsoever, even getting to Monkerton School. So you can imagine getting to a school that's a mile and a half further with a 4-year-old, not much fun. And then lastly, the pinhole surgery extension. Now, I don't know if everybody's aware, but pinhole surgery is actually pinhole and Broadcliff surgery. It's a cross-border surgery on 2 sites. I know that pinhole and Broadcliff surgery has been struggling with capacity for quite some time now, largely due to our expansion in the West End of East Devon. Now, a lot of our expansion zones are very much closer to the pinhole surgery than the Broadcliff surgery, but if as a patient you apply for an appointment, you may be given either site. So although this site is actually technically an Exeter City Council area, it is in fact the same surgery, and a lot of the capacity issues have been caused by our development on the edge of Exeter. So I very much support that expansion going forwards, notwithstanding what I said earlier about being a patient, and the declaration I made. So thank you very much for your consideration for all these projects, and please know that they are very much needed. So when you come to vote on them, it will be very gratefully received if you can vote favourably for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rylance. Councillor Bethany Collins.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about the Tipton St John Primary School feasibility study, which is 5.9 in the report. I appreciate that obviously the bids were oversubscribed and that seemed like a natural way of deciding which bids would be taken forwards, and I understand the rationale behind doing so. However, I think it's a real shame because Tipton St John Primary School is a priority one, and there is a pressing need, similar to obviously the Tithbarn School, not to make a sort of comparison between the actual bids because they all have their merits. But I just think it's a real shame that we're missing out on the potential to start this work because it is an established priority and it's been going on for a significant amount of time. There has been a danger to life sort of warning with the school and the flooding, and I think that as soon as we can get some work done to be able to identify a placement for the school, and I would love that to stay in Tipton where possible, which is why I think we need to get this work done on the 3 sites. So I think it's a real shame that it's recommended for a refusal. So I would ask that potentially we could actually defer this decision, as Councillor Ahern said earlier on, so that we can have further conversations with the DFE and to bring back a bid that sort of satisfies this authority and satisfies the needs of the residents of Tipton. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I sit on the SIL group, so I don't know if I have to declare an interest for that or not. I can promise you these were debated, not just because I was there, but by all of the members, and we took a lot of time getting people in to give us advice, etc. on this. The only one that I would like to mention is the Sangs at Broadcliff. I totally support it. But the £2 million for the endowment, we felt, and I felt certainly, that was just not the right way to finance this. You're being asked to say 40,000. I would suggest that you cut that to 25,000 at this time, because it's only for 3 years anyway. And whatever happens, however much you give, please make sure that it is ring-fenced somehow for that project, because with devolution coming up, otherwise it's just money going to go into a very big pot, and I wonder where it will go. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Barlow, and for your contributions to those meetings. A lively discussion, wasn't it, on a number of occasions there. Councillor Faithfull, anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. Reference Tipton Primary School. Tipton Primary School in Tipton is included as part of our draft local plan, and surely it needs to be assessed. There is, I would say, having looked at the subject before, quite a number of alternative sites in Tipton, which personally I think are better than the one that was put forward for our draft local plan. And maybe it is just the way the system works, but I think certainly at town council level, there was questions over the amount of money, and we'd like to have more clarification as to how this money is supposed to be. This figure of £600,000 is for this piece of work. But I would support Councillor Ahern's comment whether it can be deferred. On a slightly different subject, reference the Tithe Barn Primary School. As I recall, Cranbrook they weren't allowed to sell a house until Cranbrook First Primary School was up and running. And it seems a bit, I don't know what you call it, disappointing that so many houses are being allowed to build in other places without a primary school up and running and functioning. But there you go.
I tend to agree with you, Peter. I think that was shall we say, unintended consequence of the government's decision to introduce the Communities Infrastructure Levy last decade. But I'm sure Mr. Freeman will correct me later if I'm wrong on that one. Coming round then to our last councillor outside committee, Councillor Roy Collins. Any comments to make, please?
Thank you, Chair. The football pitches proposed by Honiton Golf Club, well, that's been going on for more than 10 years. It seems there's no planning applications been considered by the planning committee. They've put in plans, withdraw them, put them in again. There's a tremendous lot of opposition because it's in an area of outstanding natural beauty. And there's no suitable roads to get there. It's very narrow, very dangerous, no buses. It's a stupid site to be putting football pitches. Do you know when this plan is likely to come before the planning committee? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. I think there we come across the separation of powers, if you will. This committee on this item is only concerned with the merits of the funding bid. Questions on the planning application, whether it's the right site, those will be, as you suggest, for the planning process to handle separately. We wouldn't have any input on that directly ourselves. It's purely the merits of the funding bid that we're being asked to consider today. Okay, thank you, members outside of committee then. So I'm going to come to our two Devon County councillors who will have to leave the room in a moment. So is that a no from Councillor Hayward, nothing to add? Or do you want to go after Jess? Okay, Councillor Jess Bailey.
Thank you very much. What I'm really hoping that the committee will do today is defer the decision on Tipton School rather than rejecting it as per the officer's recommendation. And just to be clear, normally with the feasibility studies, there would be some doubt about whether the funding is available for the project. Well, actually here, DFE funding is actually available to build the school. It's just a question of where. So I think in many ways there's less risk associated with this item, this project, than some of the others. Having said that, I support all of the other projects, but I just want to be clear that this one should be deferred pending further work. And I want to specifically focus on one aspect of the report, and that is the section that talks about the excessive requirements of the Department for Education. And I think this is reference to the requirement for 3 outline permissions for the 3 sites in Tipton. So I've contacted our MP about this and raised concerns about the excessive requirements. And I've requested that he organises a meeting with the Department for Education, Devon County Council, and Devon County Council to discuss these requirements. But I think we need to allow some time for this to happen. And I'm concerned that if it's just rejected outright, then there's not going to be any time for that to happen. I've heard this morning that our MP is going to be contacting Department for Education. So please, please don't throw this out. Please defer it. It is a priority 1 project. There is the money for the school to be built. So please just keep it in the system, put it on hold, defer it, and then it will enable those discussions about the DfE's excessive requirements to be looked at and then potentially brought back at a future point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. Councillor Hayward, anything to add?
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from Councillor Bailey's sort of commentary on this, this is another classic one of there's money available for it and you're really sort of chopping up how it's paid for. Arguably, if Devon could pay for this feasibility work and then at the build stage ask for 600,000, the amount of money is the same, it's just in what order it's done. So again, I'm so new to Devon, I've got to get my head around how these things work. But I mean, it's almost a sequencing issue rather than funding issue. So perhaps again, there could be a deferral of that. The point Councillor Collins raised, Councillor Roy Collins, about the planning, and you covered it, is exactly true. You know, you're not going to go through all the admin and the drama of a planning application or process unless you know you've got the funding. So this is, I think, the right order. You've got to show the commitment, make the money available, and then there's conditionality. If they don't then go forwards, it stays with us. The final point is a question, and I support these, and I'll have to leave the room, and I'll come back to you on another time about the issue of our ORIs where Devon's concerned. But it's a question through you, Chair, to Mr. Freeman, or perhaps for yourself. With these funding, so say, take for example, the biggest lump of this 9.9 million to Devon, the 4.5, which is conditional on DCC providing detailed costings. Just for clarity, at the point these are approved, do we as an authority give Devon 4.5 and say, you sit on that, you look after that until you can deliver it? Or is the conditionality that you provide the evidence and at the point you can spend it, then we give it over? Because obviously there is an issue, and if Mr. Davey was here, I'm sure he'd be quite unkeen to hand over £4.5 million where it couldn't be immediately spent, whereas actually it can do some good for East Devon's finances in a ring-fence way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hayward. I was going to move on to questions once we'd had all those comments anyway. So Mr. Freeman, do you want to respond to that one quickly?
Yeah, certainly. So all of these proposed supported bids would be subject to a funding agreement which would set out all of that, but ordinarily we'd hold on to the funds until they're at a point of being able to spend it, basically.
Okay, thank you both. We will take a moment for you to go on your holiday to the outside world. For them. We will, indeed, yes. We won't forget about you. Okay, thank you very much then, members. We come to, are there any questions about the contents of the report, the method by which we've reached these recommendations, etc. Before we move to debate? I have Councillor Young.
Chair.
Yeah, number of pupils at Tipton St John's School, I just wonder if we know how many, because we're obviously we're providing a new school at the other location for 280. I don't believe Tipton St John has 280, and it's already there. But I know there are a very difficult situation with Tipton being in the floodplain. But it shows some balance if we know how many pupils there are there in a school that is continually being flooded.
Through you, Chair, I don't have the numbers to hand. I know that there's issues around where the kids are coming from in terms of Tipton School, in though my understanding is a lot of the kids are travelling out from Ottery St Mary to Tipton rather than are actually from Tipton St John. So this issue around the location of the school, as much as I appreciate it's a hub of the community and why the community want to retain it in the village, there is that issue about where is it best placed. And then I think that also brings in what size the school then becomes, because obviously we're allocating quite significant growth at Ottery St Mary in the new local plan, which necessitates need for additional primary school provision in the town. So then you get into issues, well, are we delivering a school at Tipton that's primarily for Tipton, which is smaller, or a larger school at Ottery St Mary that's meeting that wider need? So it's quite a complicated picture, I think, in terms of these different sites and what might be delivered where, depending on what decisions are made, which are outside of our control. The bid that's in front of us is simply for £600,000 to do feasibility work about 3 options in Tipton, when the decision might be made to put it in Ottery St Mary anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. I had Councillor Ingham, then Councillor Faithful.
Is he in committee?
We're in questions.
Oh, right, okay. I just want to understand on the Network Rail bid request on that. It says here the reason for not supporting the bid, feasibility study with no guarantee that the project will proceed. Did officers recommend that this bid was rejected to the research committee? What was it called? The SIL working group. Did officers recommend that this was rejected, or was this a decision taken by that working group against the advice of officers?
No, it was a recommendation of officers, and not specifically on that bid, but on both that and the Tipton one, that we felt we shouldn't be supporting bids that are simply for, additional reports and feasibility studies. That we should be, given the demands on the SIL pot, that we should be using the money to actually deliver physical infrastructure, rather than feasibility studies as a general principle. So that was one of our earliest recommendations, I think, to the working group, was to establish that as a principle from the starting point. Not that it's not important that this feasibility work is done, but that others should be funding that and then coming to us for funding potentially to physically deliver the project once there's clarity about what the project is and that it can be delivered. Otherwise, we could potentially spending, well, in the case of Network Rail bid, £1 million on a feasibility study for a piece of infrastructure that's never delivered, when we could be spending that on delivering primary school or sports pitches and things that are actually going to make an immediate difference to people's lives.
Just as a quick follow-up, just to illuminate that a bit further, am I right in remembering there was some concerns about whether the regulations allowed us to just spend on a feasibility study?
There was. We did look into that. So there isn't anything that precludes us from doing that, but I think it's fair to say Community Infrastructure Levy was established on the principle that it was funding the delivery of infrastructure. Obviously, there will be occasions when obviously design work and feasibility work is needed and can be part of those wider costs. But generally, it would be as part of a wider bid. For example, the multi-purpose trail, obviously there's further design work and costings that need to be done, but the money is secured to deliver it. They have a very good, clear idea as to what that project is and some initial plans of it. Whereas, the passing loop, for example, we don't know where that would go. There's various initial stages work been done, but it's a long way further behind than the other projects that are in this process, where a lot more work has been done to progress them, to design them, to cost them out. So we have that greater certainty to know that the money will be largely going to their physical delivery, but yes, some of it would still be going to additional design work and feasibility work.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up, when I joined this council, I remember a councillor, Hadley, lobbying for this passing loop, and that was 30 years ago. So my question is, when do officers believe that they will be able to prioritise this as an infrastructure improvement? Because if we don't start soon, trains will no longer exist by the time we consider a passing loop here.
Thank you, Chair. I think the problem with the passing loop is it's such a huge piece of infrastructure. It's tens of millions of pounds of funding that's going to be needed to go through all of the different stages of feasibility work that Network Rail will provide, and then to deliver the project itself. I think I'm hearing in the region of sort of 50 million or something that's needed ultimately. So we could spend all of our SIL pot from now and for probably another couple of decades on it if we wanted to. But fundamentally, it's a piece of national infrastructure. It's about national rail resilience into the southwest as well. And so my feeling is this is a project that should be primarily funded by central government, and we should be potentially match funding it as a local contribution. And so to use what might be seen as a reasonable local contribution of £1 million or so pounds on feasibility work without any certainty that it's going to deliver anything is what concerns me. If Network Rail were coming to us and saying we've got this design project, it's fully costed, the government are going to put £45 million or something, we need an extra million or two from local sources to match fund it, then it would be a very different proposition. But at the moment, we're still a long way from that. But I do recognise the importance of that project, and the delivery of half-hour rail services across the district would be a massive contribution to green travel agenda in the district, and encouraging green travel, reducing car usage in key destinations along that route. But unfortunately, the funding that we could ever contribute to that would be a drop in the ocean. It needs a commitment from government, really.
Councillor Faithful, questions?
Thank you, Chair. Well, first bit, I just wanted to point out, I've had the conversations I've had reference Tipton Primary School. If it stays in Tipton, we were talking about a 120 pupil school in the village as a village school. But I'm also a little bit concerned that it seems the conversations coming from Mr. Freeman that we've already decided it's moving to Otley.
Is this a question, Councillor
But
Faithful?
my initial thing was just answering the question that was asked before about 120 pupils, how big the school was going to be in Tipton, and it's 120 pupil school is the conversation that I've had. But I am, how do we, so here's a question for you, if you want your question. Why are we having conversations suggesting the school is already decided to go to Otley when Devon County Council are having a feasibility study in Tipton?
Through you, Chair, I certainly didn't mean to suggest that any decision had been made that it needs to go to Otley St Mary. All I was saying that is the development proposed in Otley St Mary in our local plan will necessitate the need for additional primary school provision in Otley St Mary, aside from whatever happens to the Tipton St John's School. Obviously, decisions about where it goes and how that provision is made is not for us today.
Councillor Barlow.
I just wonder if the Mr. Freeman could confirm, please, if there is only a population of 350 people in Tipton St John.
I don't know off the top of my head what the population of Tipton St John is. I wouldn't be surprised if it was in that ballpark there.
Thank you, Chair.
a Google search for the population of Tipton St John does indeed say around 350, but I suspect that's possibly the same source as the one you've just Googled, Ian, so maybe we shouldn't take that as gospel. Any other questions on this report, please, before we move to debate? No? Okay, thank you very much then, members. We have a... What? Shut up! Apologies, committee. I think I'm not going to say its name, but it heard me say something I didn't. I've completely lost my train of thought. Councillor Fernley sent in something that she just wanted to be read out briefly before we move to the rest of debate.
Yes, it's a supporting statement. As ward member for Broadclist, I'm really pleased that the Working Party has supported 4 bids for my ward. The provision of an off-road cycle path from Station Road Broadclist to Moss Hayne is a key piece of the jigsaw puzzle for the Clist Valley Trail, active travel and disabled access from Cranbrook to Exeter and onto Exmouth or Dawlish. It will be a real asset for the area, improving the area for wildlife and aligning with Broadclist neighbourhood plan. Clist Meadows, the first sang to be built by EDDC, is in a great setting and will provide a rapidly growing area with a place to enjoy the countryside for health and well-being. It's also a place for dog walkers to go that will help protect the heathland in the district. The doctor's surgery will close its books in October if this money isn't forthcoming. This brings with it a catalogue of disaster which could cause the surgery to fail and even greater problems across the area for access to a GP and associated services. One of the most frequent things I am asked, when is Tithe Bar going to get a school? Many families moved to Tithe Bar because that was promised in the sales literature. People had no idea that it would take 7 years before funding was possible. Supporting this bid is one of the single most effective ways of driving down congestion and reducing the carbon footprint of the area. As children are driven from Clist St Mary to St Leonard's for their schooling, this bid heralds the start of a new community with a building for people to meeting and the possibilities for children and parents able to make friends close to where they live. In a rapidly growing area, its fabulous seal is finally being used for what it's designed for. I hope the committee will support all these bids and help a fledgling community have what is taken for granted across many places in the wider district. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Wendy. Wouldn't be the first time we'd had developers embellishing the truth slightly, but there we go. Okay, into debate then, committee. You have, as a reminder, 4 recommendations in front of you to accept and reject en bloc, as is currently reflected in the report. So if we choose to differ, we'll need to amend those accordingly. Members, Councillor Young.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the SIL delivery group for deliberating on this. I know it took a long time, and also I'd like to thank the SIL officers for their guidance on this. I support everything, all the recommendations, but I do have some concerns about Tipton Primary School. I'm very supportive of this school to be recited, and I've been involved in some of the issues because it's in the of the flooding issue there. I totally agree. It needs to be cited in Tipton, as it is a valuable village asset. And picking up on Councillor Hayward's suggestion that we might defer the 600,000 that they want and tap it onto the construction costs to move this forward might be an idea. I don't know if there's any solution to that. So before I would make a recommendation to support all the proposals, I just want to hear if we can do something with Tipton St John with either hold it in abeyance or have further words with the County Council, as we really need to urgently work together on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. I'll look to Mr. Freeman for some thoughts on what we could do by way of a deferral, if anything.
Thank you, Chair. I hadn't really thought in terms of deferring any of the decisions from today. I mean, obviously, while we haven't done sealed bids for some time before this process, obviously the hope is to now get into a regular process, if not an annual process, of taking bids and assessing them. So, I mean, there's obviously an opportunity for them to make a further bid the next time we run a bidding round. Although, as Chair's already asked me, when would that be? You know, it's taken us 6 months to get this far with this round. So, you know, doing this on an annual basis perhaps isn't going to work, but certainly doing it a lot more regularly than we have been would work. I'm concerned that I'm not clear on why we would be deferring it and what's going to change between now and then, and whether or not what would come back would be this same bid or a different bid. It feels like if we're seeking clarity from Department of Education on their requirements and all of this, then this could turn into quite a different bid, at which point is it a deferral of this bid or is it a new bid for the next round of funding? And in any event, I haven't heard any sort of voices sort of saying that we should be funding feasibility studies so much as we should be rejigging the money so that DCC are funding the feasibility work, and then we're potentially plugging any gap in terms of funding in terms of the physical delivery of the school. So again, that's a very different bid again, isn't it? There's no precedent for deferring sealed bids, but I don't see any reason why you can't if that's what you want to do as a committee. But deferral till when, and what does that bid then look like when it does come back? Are we setting a precedent in terms of other bids that we're rejecting that might be able to come back with a stronger case? We've kind of taken everything that we've got and came in through this bidding round to try and keep it an equal playing field. So my nervousness would be around setting a bit of a precedent and treating this one differently to other bids. You know, equally Network Rail might come back and say, you know, that they'd change their bid if they had the time again, knowing what our recommendation now is. So I'd just ask members to give some thought to setting a precedent here, and also the fact that this is an ongoing process. This won't be the only opportunity for them to apply for sealed bidding. There will be other opportunities in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. I think that's created more questions than it has necessarily answers, but thank you. Members, any further speakers? Councillor Ingham.
Thanks, Chair. I am a bit concerned, as you hope, over recommendation 1, you know, and I think what concerns me is the process by which you've gone through to arrive at the list. You've got to do something, and you've got to create a list. And I hear that you've opted for the ones that you can achieve. I understand that. It's a good reason, rather than the ones you can't. But are these the absolute priorities? There are other ones that are more difficult to deliver that yet you haven't even considered. That'd be interesting to know. What I also don't like is recommendation 3, because we're looking at some, in our terms, heavy money values, and with some get-out clauses, some reasoning that I don't necessarily agree with, let's say. On the Moss Hayne Tithe Barn Primary School, however desirable that is, to have it conditional on Devon County Council providing more detailed costings. And we've got 4.5 million in the balance there, you know. and that's going to be down to 2 people, not this committee. I'm not happy with that, and that's just one example, because it's easy to understand, because it's big bucks, isn't it? If it was my money, I'd be furious if someone was asking for that sort of funding with this sort of logic and the risk involved in that approval. I'm not happy, Chair. I don't know how others feel about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ingham. Maybe you might want to think about how you'd want to amend 3 in particular. I think one is about which we do and don't approve, isn't it? So I think that's probably some more discussion there. But if you have any suggestions about recommendation 3, open to hearing them. Councillor Blakey.
Thank you, Chair. I'm broadly in support of the recommendations as written, but actually, like Councillor Ingham, I do have a bit of a concern about the funding for the Tithe Barn Primary School, because it's almost an open-ended cheque that we're being asked to write it. We're thinking, well, it's roughly £4.5 million, but are we able to limit it to £4.5 million and say that is absolutely it, or are we going to be asked to commit to 75% of the cost of whatever the eventual cost of
We are absolutely limiting
be?
it to £4.5 million. Absolutely.
Right. In which case that is fine. And the only other comment I would make is that I think it's very disappointing about the fairly feeble level of financial support that the NHS are giving to providing one of its most important and basic functions in the funding of the pinhole surgery extension. £350,000 contribution, with the majority of the money being asked for from us, I think is actually quite poor. I appreciate that we're being put into a position of having little choice here because it is an absolutely vital service. But as ever, similar things are happening in Cranbrook, we think the NHS could do rather better. But in conclusion, support the proposals.
Thank you, Councillor Blakey. I think the issue is that they have a budget of, what was it, 250,000 for capital works in all of Devon, Mr. Freeman? Have I got that figure right?
Yes, from memory, it was virtually nothing for physical improvements to GP practices in Devon. I would say the situation improved while we were considering the bid, because I think what perhaps isn't clear, I think the initial bid was higher, and it's been reduced because of this money that's potentially available through this NHS Utilisation and Modernisation Fund, which I think is giving about 400,000 if it's successful. So, but we are still paying the majority of the cost, which is regrettable, to say the least.
I say again, feeble.
Indeed. Thank you, Councillor Blakey. Councillor Brian Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I agree with a lot of the previous speakers. Tithe Barn School is desperately needed. And I understand from canvassing with my wife and my friends during the election that this was top of residents' concern to get the school done. It's been a long time coming. And if I've read my notes correctly, which I hope I have, this is going to be decided by the end of May. Otherwise, the developer can take the land back. Is that right?
I think, through Chair, the transfer of the land has to happen by May 27.
27. I beg your pardon, I got the wrong year, I'm sorry. But even though, that's not a long time to go, so we need a bit of urgency in this to get it done and sorted out. Also, the other things in the walkway is essential, because it's only going to be a matter of 8 or 10 years, which will soon fly by, that the southern side of Cranbrook will be developed, and then we'll be looking at another school over there. But we won't be in that position to do anything about it then, because this organisation won't exist anymore. But it needs to be a priority, and we need to plan ahead to hand over to whoever is going to be in the unitary authority to say, look, we've done our work on this and this is where we need to go, and head them in the right direction. But I'm in favour of all of the report. I think it's very good, very thorough. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brian Bailey. Councillor Levine, I forgot your name for a second there.
Survive. Well, really would like to propose that we accept all four recommendations, please, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Levine. Before I just check in with Councillor Ingham, do we have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Blakey, thank you. Councillor Ingham, did you have any suggestions about recommendation 3?
No, Chair, and that's because I've listened to the debate. I'm in a minority of one, I believe. So therefore, it seems logical if most people support those four recommendations, it'll come out. There's no
Okay,
need to.
thank you, Councillor Ingham. The only thing I was going to suggest is if members wished, I'm sure Mr Freeman could live with delegated authority in consultation with the Director of Governance and myself, if committee felt it was necessary. Mr Freeman says he could live with it. So if committee does feel that necessary, I'll pause. Any comments? Councillor Ingham thinks it's an improvement. Everybody else is sort of not bothered. I'll propose that as an amendment then from the chair, unless the proposer is happy to accept that it's in consultation with the Director of Governance and myself. Happy, proposer and seconder? Yep, okay. So we'll amend that recommendation slightly. Any further comments before we go to a vote on those recommendations? Councillor Ingham?
Just to say and remind members the logic of that, you can either have yourself, Chair, and Ed Freeman ratifying that through recommendation 3, or you can have Ed Freeman and someone who is not closely versed in the ramifications of what we've just debated. It makes sense to have two people who hopefully understand what the hell's going on. I think it's a good idea. Thank you, Chair.
I'll take that as a resounding endorsement. Thank you, Councillor Ingham. Councillor Levine?
Could I just add to the recommendations our thanks to the SEAL working group because they have done a tremendous piece of hard work.
Thank you, Councillor Levine. I think we can probably note that in the minutes, Wendy, rather than needing to take it as a recommendation. But thank you, Councillor Levine. Point well made. Any further comments before we move to a vote on these recommendations then? Are members happy to take them in a block, or do members wish to vote individually on them? I sense block. Okay, in which case then, all those in favour of the recommendations as amended, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, I count 7. Those against? 1, and I'm assuming that's no abstentions then. Okay, thank you very much, members. Those are carried. It's been an hour and 40 minutes, so I'm just going to suggest we take a 5-minute comfort break and resume slightly more than 5 minutes, perhaps 11:50, just so it's an even number. Just to say, members, we are still waiting for Mr. Hunter to join us. Okay, thank you very much for waiting, members. We will make a start on the rest of the agenda, and that begins with agenda item 8, South East Devon Wildlife Joint Habitat Site Mitigation Strategy 2025 to 2030. A nice short report from Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. So members will be aware that since 2014 we've been working closely with Teambridge and Exeter councils on mitigating the impacts of development on the East Devon Pillbed Heaths, the Ex-Estuary and Dawlish Warren as protected habitats, which it's been determined through previous work that development within 10 kilometres of those areas has an impact on those habitats in terms of mitigation of recreational impacts from residential development within those areas. And so we developed in 2014 a mitigation strategy for addressing those impacts and established a joint habitat mitigations executive committee, which Councillor Young here is the council's representative on. Essentially what's before you today is what we're terming a new strategy, but effectively it's an evolution of the previous strategy of mitigation measures for addressing those recreational impacts on those protected habitats. And this is a joint piece of work that's been commissioned by the three authorities to ensure that we have adequate mitigation measures to address the impacts of development coming forward up to 2030, this being addressed on a rolling basis. So effectively, the strategy is made up of a mixture of on-site mitigation measures, which are about management and access measures and activities. We have a series of wardens that operate those and engage with site users and help to educate them in terms of how they can minimise their impacts. And there's other measures that have been put in place to try and mitigate the impacts of development on-site. And then there are off-site measures, which are effectively the suitable alternative natural green spaces, which members will be aware of. And the strategy has delivered a number of those, primarily 2 key sites in Teambridge. And we hope through the emerging strategy, we'll be delivering further SANGs and hopefully some in East Devon in this period. So as I say, the new strategy covers 5 years from 2025 to 2030. And some of the key changes, I suppose, from the previous strategy is there's a realisation, I think, of more staff resource being needed, both in terms of wardens, but also staff resource for SANGs and its delivery. So that's been budgeted in to this new strategy, which is going to lead to additional costs, which will need to be passed on to developers. We're in the process of calculating those and developing a new charging schedule, which will again, as is the current position, come as a mixture of top slicing off SIL and also Section 106 contributions for the non-infrastructure elements. So the next steps are that this strategy and this report is going to each of the 3 partner authorities, seeking for the strategy to be agreed and adopted. And this report has come to you for you to endorse that approach and make a recommendation to Cabinet that the site mitigation strategy be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Questions? Councillor Barlow.
Thank you, Chair. I just wondered if we have any idea as to what the price might be going up to per house. Thank you.
Yes, but I don't have the figures in front of me. But sorry. Yeah, I thought Councillor Barlow was asking in terms of the numbers for the cost for individual developments going forward, which I don't think is in the report. So that's something that's being worked on at the moment. It is going to go up fairly significantly from where it currently is. But we obviously need to look at how that's done in terms of the split between SIL and what we're currently doing through Section 111 agreements under the Local Government Act, which was about largely about the pooling restrictions under 106, which have now gone. So we also need to review how we're collecting those as well. So that's not something that's before you today. I think we'll need to bring that through as a separate item at a later date.
Councillor Barlow?
Well, I just want to say, I presume the SIL contribution wouldn't go up that much for the simple reason the SIL is going up anyway. For the amount we get for SIL goes up with inflation, so the percentage should stay the same. But I just am concerned that if it goes up too much, it's just another reason for developers not to give us social housing there.
Well, through you, Chair, we need to review our SIL charging schedule anyway. Councillor Barlow is correct, it goes up annually because it's index linked, but we also need to review that in light of the work we're doing on the new local plan and the infrastructure delivery plan. All needs to feed into that with a review of the SIL charging schedule. So as I say, we need to bring a future report in terms of that. But I think actually, sorry, what Councillor Young's referring to is the mitigation strategy itself refers to some of the figures within that. So that there is an indication within there, which the Chair is kindly handing over to me. So yeah, the costs per dwelling range from £852 for the accessory only to 977 for accessory and Dawlish Warren, but that's the SAM measures only. That's the on-site costs. That's not the SANGS costs as well. So that's only part of the picture. So this is why I say we need to bring the full picture to you at a future meeting, but it is going up fairly substantially.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions on this paper, please? No? Okay, in which case we move to debate, and I will move the recommendation as written from the Chair, just for good order. Are there any councillors that wish to speak, please? Councillor Ingham.
I think that's fair enough, Chair, because you either agree with it in principle or you don't. It's been going on a fair while, and you either think the process is apposite or not. Let's go for it.
Indeed, thank you, Councillor Ingham. Unless there are any further hands then? No? Okay, in which case I'll take us to a vote on the recommendation as written in the paper, please. All those members in favour, please. I think that's 7.
6, 7, 8, is it, I think?
Oh, yes, 8, because Councillor Hayward's back. Yes, that's right, 8. Okay, those against, please. 1, and those abstaining would be none. Okay, thank you, members. That recommendation is carried, which brings us then to agenda item 9, the East Devon Local Plan timetable update. Mr. Freeman.
Thank you, Chair. So members will be aware that we ran a Regulation 19 consultation earlier this year, which concluded at the end of March on the new local plan. And the intention had been to do a 2-stage Regulation 19 consultation. So that was stage 1 on the plan itself. The intention was to have a second round of consultation that would start either later this month or early next month on essentially the new community. So the master plan work that's going on the new community and some of the supporting evidence on the new community. And this report is sort of reflecting on that timetable and thinking that actually that's not going to work as things stand. So there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, as the report notes, we've had A lot of comments come back through the consultation on local plan, and a number of concerns raised, particularly by statutory bodies in relation to some of the evidence that's currently missing. So there's mentioned in the report about Environment Agency comments about the water cycle study, which wasn't available for the consultation and still isn't completed, unfortunately, but we are making progress slowly. They've also raised some concerns about the Strategic Flood Risk Assessment Level 2, as some of the late addition sites hadn't been through the Stage 2 process. So this comes back to what I was saying earlier in response to some of the public questions about the evidence for any local plan is always a constant evolving process as the plan develops and you develop the evidence alongside. And so there were some what we considered minor gaps in the evidence, but some of the consultees have considered those to be more significant than perhaps we felt they were. And that's reflected in, say, the comments from the Environment Agency, but also Natural England in terms of habitat mitigations issues. I think it was flagged up in the habitat assessment about the air quality impacts on the pebblebed heaths and the need for a mitigation strategy for that. That work has been commissioned, but we obviously don't have that yet. And that's obviously raising concerns from Natural England's perspective as well. So in terms of the timetable, well, we could potentially proceed and add that evidence into the process, or potentially building up issues, so we say at the examination stage, whereas it would be much better to have a position, an agreed position where hopefully these statutory consultees, such as Environment Agency, Natural England, are happy with the plan at the point of submission, and we can have a statement of common ground with them that sets that out, rather than potentially have these issues that are still sat there at that point. The other issue is in relation to the new community work. So obviously this is an extremely complex piece of work. There were some workshops the week before last. And there's still, while the master plan is developing, there's still further work that needs to be done on that. There's obviously outstanding questions in terms of delivery models and how that new community and that vision and master plan for that new community that's emerging would be delivered. And announcements with regard to the government's New Towns programme to be made, hopefully early summer, which could have a bearing on this as well. And the report mentions a report that's being planned for July Cabinet that looks at delivery vehicles in terms of the new community as well. So there's a whole narrative, I think, that goes with the master plan in terms of how we would envisage as a council delivering that master plan, and potentially the support from government and other sources that might enable that. Alongside some of the technical work, as I say, there's further work on the master plan to be done. There's further transport modelling and assessment work being undertaken at the moment, and discussions taking place with Devon County Council as a highway authority and National Highways in relation to that. And that work is not going to be completed in time for a consultation in June either. So my current view is that we need to review the timetable in terms of local plan production. Members will be aware the critical thing in terms of the transitional arrangements in the new National Planning Policy Framework was that we got the into Reg 19 stage by, I think it was the 12th of March, which obviously we've done. The other critical thing is to submit the plan for examination within 18 months of the new NPPF, which came out just before Christmas. So it does just about leave us enough time to do this further work in terms of the evidence for the local plan itself, this work on the new community in terms of completing the master plan, some of the evidence that sits behind that, and work on delivery vehicles to have a clear approach that we can present in the second Reg 19 consultation, but to run that consultation after the summer holidays, so probably starting in October with the papers coming through this committee in September. We can then run that for a 6-week consultation to finish well before Christmas, report back the findings of that consultation early next year, and then still submit the plan within the 18 months of the new NPPF, and therefore comply with the transitional arrangements, which then avoids us having to address the increased housing numbers in the new standard method. So That's the current thinking in terms of the timetable. This report is seeking members' agreement to that as a general approach, and then we would work that up into a new local development scheme, which is the formal timetable, which could then come to your next meeting, and then that would need to go to council ultimately to be agreed as the new approach. But I feel that's the best way forward in terms of addressing the concerns that are coming through the consultation. So it gives us an opportunity to address those in the second Reg 19 consultation in terms of the issues highlighted in terms of the local plan that we've already consulted on, and also presenting a clearer narrative and framework for the delivery of the second new community with a fully consulted on and engaged master plan and a narrative about the delivery vehicle as to how we would deliver that approach. So that's the proposal, and the recommendation is that members endorse that approach. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman. Questions first then. I'll start outside of committee with, we'll start with Councillor Faithfull this time.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if I wasn't listening properly, but will there be a basic feedback from the consultation, or do we have to wait for the whole combined everything together one?
There will be feedback from Regulation 19A, as we've been calling it, yes.
Have we got some sort of, how long-ish can we get the initial response? I think that's what some of the public were concerned about.
Through you, Chair, I mean, I think in terms of summarising the feedback that we've received, we could probably bring a summary of that to the next meeting. I think the questions that inevitably arise from that is what, as officers, would be proposed that we do in terms of responding to that, which might take a bit longer. I actually have a meeting with the team tomorrow to sort of go through that now that they've fully reviewed the responses. So I'll be in a better position to sort of discuss that with the chair and decide how we want to deal with that. If we're bringing a report that's sort of you said, this is what we propose we do, I think that would take a bit longer. But just in terms of an initial summary of the feedback we've received, we could certainly bring back to the next meeting. My only concern is that it probably raises lots of questions without us necessarily having the answers. So there's a bit of a sequencing thing there that we need to think through and discuss. But certainly in the next couple of months.
Thank you, Chair. It says in the 1,200 individuals replied, most use the online portal, however, a substantial number chose not to. Can you tell me what is a substantial number? And also our 5-year housing land supply is obviously, last time was 2.96 years, I think, or something, from memory. I just wonder, are we still confident that we are going to be able to get to that by the time the plan is adopted? Because I believe that's that it has to be at 5 years for it to be adopted. Is that correct? Thank you.
So in terms of the first question, I don't know off the top of my head exactly what proportion used commonplace. I think perhaps part of the issue was that the way we posed the questions on commonplace were very much about, which we have to do, I would stress, in terms of a Reg 19 consultation, is ask questions about, do you believe the plan is sound or not? And a lot of people, I think, didn't necessarily want to answer that question. They just wanted to tell us what they thought of the plan. So they didn't necessarily understand the nature of the consultation and submitted their comments through other means that didn't mean they needed to answer that question. The other thing is, I think, in a lot of cases, you've got people like developers who are promoting a particular site who want to submit their master plan for the site or viability reports and things, which again isn't what we were specifically asking for. The consultation was specifically asking for comments about the soundness of the plan. And I think it's a requirement of the regulations that we do it like that, but it inevitably causes some confusion and doesn't enable people to say what they want to say. So I don't know that it's necessarily a failing of commonplace so much as a failing of the legislation and how we have to run that consultation. But it's something we can look at and see what we can learn from that in terms of the second regulation 19 consultation. In terms of 5-year land supply, yeah, we do need to have a 5-year housing land supply at the point of adoption. We're monitoring that position. You're right, at last count it was at 2.97 years, but there are consents working through, well, applications running through the system in terms of applications on sites that are proposed to be allocated in the Reg 19 plan that we'll be asking Planning Committee to consider over the coming meetings, and we'll keep monitoring that position and stand by the previous advice I gave to you and to the Planning Committee that we do need to bolster our supplier position, and that fundamentally needs to be done through granting consents. So that's a work in progress, shall we say, in terms of bolstering that position.
I just wonder if you could supply, after the meeting, just the number of people who did it not online, the substantial number. Thank you.
Councillor Roy Collins.
Thank you, Chair. I feel that the public have not been given the opportunity to comment on these plans in person. You've not had any exhibitions in any towns or public meetings where a lot of people, they feel unable to write letters and things or do emails and that. I think they would have appreciated the opportunity to come here and speak. You had quite a lot of meetings that you cancelled, which that denied the public the chance. And 3 minutes is nothing near enough. You proved that this morning with the speakers. They need at least 5-10 minutes, I feel. And myself, I've had quite a lot of trouble with my iPad. I've had to come in here perhaps 3 or 4 times a month, and I've had trouble this morning. I've had, this iPad's not worked since Thursday. I've been in there next door, and they still haven't got it right. But I do feel that the council should have promoted their meetings better. There's been nothing in the newspapers. I've scanned the newspapers and I've seen nothing about this strategic planning that people can send in their comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. Coming into committee then, questions on this paper, please. I saw Jeff's hand just first.
3.3.2 water cycle study. We've got response back. I don't know what form that response is in and how quickly it's going to be to amalgamate that response from South West Water into a report. So, can we have some more meat on that, please?
So yes, as the report notes, we have unfortunately had to wait over 6 months for data from South West Water to inform the study. This is following a meeting we had with the consultants and with South West Water last summer. I think some of that data is helpful. Some of it is not what we were asking for. So there's further work needed. I have a meeting, or trying to set up a meeting with the consultants to review this and see how we draw this to a conclusion. Conscious that it has been going on for a long time, and that we need to have some clarity, I suppose, about the final findings of the water cycle study, particularly in terms of wastewater infrastructure. And I think that's where some of the data is currently lacking, is on that area. So continue to work with the consultants to try and bring that to a conclusion. Obviously, if members agree the new timetable, then there'll be an absolute final date of needing to bring that to members before that second round of Reg 19 consultation. But really, we want it well before then to give members an opportunity to review that and debate that before we get into that, mindful that it's a particularly controversial issue and a particularly important issue for the impacts of development in the plan on the environment.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Councillor Ingham.
Thank you, Chair. I understand Mr. Freeman's request and need to amend his timetable, his schedule, to make sure he can achieve all the things he's trying to. I certainly understand his need for flexibility, and we support that. Some things have to speed up, and therefore other things are going to slow down, aren't they? And he has to balance the books on how he achieves that. But I'd like to know if we can, if he's prepared to give us, if not a commitment, a target date for that endpoint, say the 1st of June 2026, when he can say, right, that's everything done. We're ready to go now. Is that possible?
Councillor, you mean in terms of the date for submission of the plan?
Yes.
Well, it will have to be at or around the start of June, because the 18 months of the NPPF being published just before Christmas is an absolute critical date. If we don't hit that, then we can't comply with the transitional arrangements, and we'd have to increase all our housing numbers by over 25%.
So more or less, you're saying yes, 1st of June is or thereabouts.
Or thereabouts, yeah. I mean, as I say, I mean, we'll bring a local development scheme through, which will have a more detailed timetable than we've got in this report. But yes, I mean, we will need to be submitting to the inspection the first half of next year.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ingham. I think the deadline in law is the 12th of June 2026, 18 months after the new NPPF, which was on December the 12th, 24. Any further questions? Councillor Brian Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Many of the residents of Exmouth, especially those that are relatively close to the Pebblebed Heaths, have, to quote Mr. Barlow, a substantial number, whatever that may be, a considerable amount, have complained that they didn't think that the first round of consultation was adequate, to quote them. I have a tendency to agree. I'm sure they would welcome 19A consultation, and they sure they would robustly take part in it. So is there a start date for this at all, please?
The Regulation 19A consultation has already happened. So that was the one that we opened in, I want to say, mid-March and closed 6 weeks later.
It started in February and closed at the end of March. But yes, that included the consultation on the sites I think you're referring to in Exmouth. And so obviously we're reviewing the comments that we've received back, and we'll be reporting them to the committee in due course. I think much of the issue was in relation to Exmouth 20, the site which the public speakers were referring to. And I think some of the confusion is because while we did consult on that site at Regulation 18 stage, it was at that time a rejected site based on officers' assessments, and you recall that it was the committee that determined that you wanted to include it as an allocation in the plan. And so I think a lot of people reviewing that Regulation 18 consultation didn't take it seriously as an allocation, because it was at that time a rejected allocation, and then were surprised that that situation changed. But obviously the Regulation 19A consultation makes that clear, that it was a proposed allocation in the plan that then enables people to comment on it in that context. So it will be interesting to see what comments we've received, and we can report them to you in due course to review.
Right. Thank you. May I just say the reason for the concern is I have a copy of a letter here from the Woodland Trust, and they've done some research into this, and they are suggesting that that area we're talking about is 200 years old. It's been a woodland area, and there are also several trees on that site that are over 400 years old. And this is why they're, along with myself and others, very concerned about the situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. And I'm sure issues like that would be picked up if and when it came to a planning application. And I know that the plans that we've seen from the promoters of the site actually don't involve developing out the very northern bits, which are the wooded bits. But as I say, a matter for future consideration. Councillor Young, question?
Just to come back on the issue that Councillor Bailey has just mentioned about ancient trees in that area of Exmouth. If you notice, Exmouth is difficult to expand because they're surrounded by sea on two sides, an estuary on another side, so they can only expand one way. That area, all of that out now, beyond the built-up area now, there are ancient trees going up to the common, no matter which way you go. So there are going to be issues with trees, no matter which development you go in Exmouth.
I didn't hear a question, but there we go. Any further questions on this paper, please? No? Okay, in which case we move to debate then. And again, for good order, I'm going to move this from the chair now. I don't think we really have a huge amount of choice, to be honest. But that's my view. Members, does anybody wish to speak? No? Okay, in which case we will move straight to a vote on the recommendation as stated in your papers then, please, members. All those in favour? That's unanimous, I think. Okay, thank you very much, members, which brings us to the last item on our agenda today, agenda item 10, the Planning and Infrastructure Bill update. Mr. Freeman.
Excuse me. Thank you, Chair. So this report is really for members' information, just to acknowledge that the Planning and Infrastructure Bill was introduced to Parliament on the 11th of March and is currently going through the committee stage, as I understand it. And there are some fairly key proposals within that bill in relation to the planning legislation and how that would be administered by this council in the future. So worth members being aware of this. One of the things that's within that is a national scheme of delegation, which is proposed that would set out the types of planning applications that can be determined and the delegated powers by planning officers and those which should be considered by planning committee. There hasn't previously been a national scheme of delegation. Obviously, members will be aware we have a local one that's within our constitution. So this potentially would trump that, I suppose, as a national scheme of delegation and set out what we have to do in terms of that. It also talks about training for members of planning committees, potentially looking at the constitution of those committees, the number of members sat on them, and things like that. So various implications for us there, potentially. It also talks about planning application fee setting. So there's talk about local fee setting. In terms of charging, which has been talked about before, and we did quite a lot of work on that. Historically, I think the charges for householder and minor developments have been way below the actual cost of delivering that service. The government recently put up the fees for householder applications, where they doubled it. So be interesting to see what impact that has in terms of budgets, but obviously they're moving towards a potential opportunity for local fee setting on a cost recovery basis. And I think potentially with a sort of default baseline national fee to sort of tide us over until then. Bearing in mind there's a lot of work that would need to be done in terms of setting up our own fees. Also, I think they have consulted on what that basis should be as to what costs can be recovered, and I think they've come to the view that it should be recovery of costs associated with dealing with applications only, and not necessarily those costs involved in plan making, so writing the local plan or planning enforcement and other things like that. So it's not going to be an opportunity necessarily to recover the total cost of the service, but potentially a substantial part of those. It talks about strategic planning on and development of the spatial development strategies across the larger geographic areas than just the current districts. So that would be potentially upon the combined county authority area and be their responsibility, with us no doubt feeding into that process. Excuse me, and then there's measures around nature recovery. So it looks at the formation of a nature restoration fund to enable a more strategic approach to habitat mitigation. So this is not dissimilar to some of the things that we talked about in terms of our own habitat mitigation board across ourselves, Exeter and Teambridge, but looking at those sorts of measures on a national scale and being administered by Natural England. So there could be some quite significant implications for the work that we've already been doing in terms of the estuary and Pebblebed Heaths, in terms of that and potential role or greater role for Natural England in terms of that, if that were to move forward. The other things that are noted around compulsory purchase powers and proposed changes to that within the bill, and measures around development corporations and establishment of those, both of which could be measures that could be helpful in terms of the delivery of the second new community that we mentioned earlier in the meeting as well. So worth watching what happens in terms of those changes as it moves through the committee stage and second reading through Parliament, but hopefully useful for members' information to see that. As I say, this is for members to note at this stage, and will be going towards forward to Cabinet on the 4th of June for their consideration as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Freeman, and indeed for writing the report, as I think this was one that I asked you to bring rather than that was in the forward plan, because the changes that, as I've taken to calling it, the PIB are proposing to make to the planning system are in my view, really, really significant and not all positive. Questions, starting outside committee, Councillor Faithful.
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at these answers to the questions, who decided what the answers should be? Is it officers or?
Sorry, which answers to what questions?
Well, I'm looking at this consultation, this, as discussed, response to the working paper.
So through you, Chair, there was a couple of working papers that were published in advance of the bill, and what we've included in the appendices are the responses that were sent in. So the Constitution gives delegated authority to myself to respond to national consultations. I do tend to, when they are significant ones, bring them through the committee. So when there have been changes to the National Planning Policy Framework, for example, tended to bring them through the committee for members' endorsement of the response. But there's been so many recently, and in this case they were simply working papers that we drafted a response as officers, and we did share and agree that with the chair, and also in the case of the nature recovery one, with Councillor Young as the relevant portfolio holder as well. So there was member oversight of those responses.
So where it's saying that we agree that the planning committee should be a small one of, say, 5 to 7, that was not a council comment, it's an officer's comment. Is that correct?
Yes, the response was drafted by officers and shared in that case with the chair before submission. I think I haven't got the reference in front of me, but I think it was in response to a question largely about sort of strategic applications, major developments going to committee. And I think there's an issue in terms of sort of what I mean, it's difficult without the working paper in front of you, which is on the hyperlink, but I think what the government were sort of saying is there benefit in having smaller committees made up of members with a greater skill set and more training to deal with more strategic applications. And I think what we were saying as officers, that there may be some benefit to that approach, acknowledging the greater training requirements and the burden that places on members, particularly on large strategic applications.
But to be clear, that's targeted committees for specific applications. That's not this authority saying we think we should cut the size of the planning committee in half. That's not what this question is asking about. Councillor Brian Bailey, then Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm wondering if this is going to allegedly streamline the situation. I imagine that's what's coming from the government. So there would be less response from councillors, less response in a negative way as far as developers are concerned. And I feel that this will be perhaps denying the public the opportunity they have to speak. At the moment, they do have an opportunity to speak. Whether, if this system was adopted, which it may or may not be, it's going to bog down a lot of officers with, especially something contentious. They're going to be having emails coming from every direction, every time of day. And I think, overall, I think it's going to undermine the democratic process. And I can't see myself in favour of it at all, Chair. Thank you very much.
Wasn't a question, Brian, but I think I agree with every word you've just said.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear it, Chair. Thank you.
Any further questions then? Bearing in mind this report is just for noting today. Councillor Brown.
I'll let you off. You know, speaking to a number of other councils, we've got quite a large planning committee. In a number of them, there are only 11, which makes more sense because it's a balance, isn't it? You can always get a result with 11. You cannot get a result with 16. Sometimes it goes, as we've found recently, down to the chairman, who in that case was a bit indecisive, unfortunately.
Equally, I think we've had a decision come down to the chairman at strategic planning during my tenure over the last 12 months. So, you know, an odd number of committee places doesn't always guarantee a decision. Councillor Ingham.
I notice in the report it says, Chair, that perhaps we've got to reconsider our constitution. But aren't we, as lemmings, going to be jumping over the cliff in a short period of time, and that would be a waste of time, and it's someone else's problem?
I think that's only if they were to put this into law before we were to be absorbed by unitary. Councillor Collins, question?
This isn't really anything new. We had something very similar in the late 60s, early 70s, called the Community Land Act, when the government had a commission and they went round looking for sites for housing and industry. In East Devon, they found Soughton for industry. I know a lady whose father farmed there that was confiscated. Very little money was paid for the farm. In Honiton, we have Ottrymore Lane, which was John Sluggott's land. That was taken. And to affect me personally, my wife, they had their farm taken, which is where Hayden's Park is to, and Avenue Mezzadone, and the doctor's surgery, that was taken. My father-in-law died in 1972. He never had a will. Unfortunately, the Land Commission had put planning permission on the land, so he didn't have a will, and it was valued as building land, and they had to sell it. 16th century farmhouse was knocked down. And I feel this act is centralisation by government. Obviously, it's going to come in when we have a new unitary authority in Devon, and it's just another way of government imposing, and all local objections won't stand a chance, especially if you have far less councillors involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. And for the history lesson, I hadn't heard of the Community Land Act, but I will look forward to reading up on it. Any further questions then, or are we happy to note this report? Councillor Ingham, then. Yeah, we can do comments. I wasn't sensing that any. Well, I was sensing that actually most of them had already been made, but we can go to comments now. Councillor Young, then Councillor Ingham.
As just been mentioned, there seems to be centralisation. I've got great concerns on a number of issues. Natural England taking over control of habitat mitigation. We can't get answers out of them now. They're coaling staff at the moment, and they want to take over the world. Well, sorry, the UK. Habitat mitigation, we do really well here. Local knowledge, local stakeholders, and some time ago we had the Localism Act. This seems to be in the opposite direction. So I would like to have more reaction back to government from this council rather than no. So rather than noting it, I think we need to do some action. Thank you.
I tend to agree, Jeff, which is why I've asked it to go to Cabinet as well, so that we can take action at a corporate level rather than just recommending that we do something as SPC. So that is very much my intention. Councillor Ingham.
Thank you, Chair. I think this bill embraces all the environmental expediency we would expect from national government at this time. It backstops for their inadequacies and their poor strategic thinking on a national level. And we're not the only district that will pay the price for this. And it's just a great shame to see this happen in the name of democracy, which it is not. Thank you, Chair.
Well put, Councillor Ingham. Councillor Hayward.
I'm very minded actually to agree with Councillor Ingham. It isn't, and it's tricky to say this without coming across in hindsight as a criticism of the principle of delegation. But the undermining principle of a planning committee is that it allows a panel of our peers to consider things. And as an officer myself, I'm often quite loath to do things under delegated authority just because it's expedient. Actually, I prefer the democratic way, even though it makes more work for me, because that's the nature of why we do these things. The issues about the environment in this bill, I mean, I recall when it came out, there was headlines, damn bats, damn newts, frogs, everything else, just pay a levy and it'll all be a fine. That doesn't work. These laws are here for a reason, and I have grave concerns about this. Today, I'm happy to note it because it's the start of a process. I look forward to the Cabinet debate, and I don't want to predetermine myself there. But yeah, I have grave reservations about this in the interest of expediency and, helping things chug along and helping to build. I think it will backfire in the long run, but we'll leave that conversation to Cabinet, Chair. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, I just meant to say I wanted to thank Councillor Collins for reminding us how history keeps repeating itself, and that national government, if they don't get their way, they stamp their way. What a disappointment that, 50 years later, the same thing happens.
Indeed, I think when I was growing up, I was promised that history had ended. Here we are again. Does anybody wish to make any specific recommendations on this paper, or are we happy to leave a robust, hopefully, response to Cabinet to formulate? Okay, in which case then I think we note that report. Mr. Hunter, do you need a vote on that one, or are you happy? Okay, in which case I'll move from the chair then that I'll move from the chair the recommendation as written in the paper, that we note the update from Mr. Freeman. All those in favour, please. That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much, members, and see you in July.